we're going to try something that has never been attempted before, which is giving an academic a floor and expecting them to only talk for 10 to 12 minutes. So I'm going to try my best. I was promised, there's a 12-minute clock there, so that's fine. I'm going to work with that. So thank you very much. As you can see, you're getting a tour of the European accents with Didier's beautiful French accent. You get a little bit of a harder accent from me. As Bridget said, I'm the chair of the Digital Disruption Research Group at the University of Sydney Business School, which is a long name. What we do is we bridge the gap between industry and academia, which still seems to exist in this country a bit more than what I was used to from Europe. And we run Disrupt Sydney, which this year will happen on the 25th of September. So this is as much as I'm going to tell you now, as I'm waiting for my slides to come up, because I haven't quite mastered the feat of going a year without slides. I have made it a point to abandon the bullet point, though, so I won't bore you with a traditional academic point-by-point presentation. Really, what I want to do is I want to make one point. I want to talk about why is it so hard to spot and understand and react to digital disruption as it unfolds right before our very eyes, right? So that's the point. So we all know there is a real phenomenon there. Something is going on. I'm not going to bore you with too many stats, but disruption is happening. But we need to understand what disruption is and what makes things disruptive. So in a recent study by Capgemini, I should know this because we're working closely with Capgemini, colleagues have found that about 3/4 of the incumbent businesses in any industry only react to the unfolding disruption about 2 years or later after it actually happens. Now, that looks a bit like people wasting their time sitting on their hands, playing, their internal politics games, all the while ignoring what is going out and raging around them outside of the organization. I want to make a point that this is not the case. We're talking about many intelligent people in incumbent businesses who have been disrupted, and they haven't been disrupted because they weren't capable of running their business. What is happening when disruption happens is a much more profound thing than just the launch of yet another app or a new technology coming into a market. So why do we have such a hard time dealing with digital disruption when it unfolds apparently, supposedly right in front of us? First of all, I want to say disruptive change is path-breaking change. It is not a linear extrapolation of the past. It is not a change that we could predict by just having more data and better models. Quite the opposite. Now, path-breaking change cannot be extrapolated. This statement there stems from 2007, and it is the received wisdom at the time about what convergence is and how technology industries work. So the idea was that convergence is something that might be driven by financial limitations, not aspiration. Consumers will always want single devices that can do something really well, like a camera or a music player. Then this happened. Okay? Now, anyone who pretends they could predict what the launch of the iPhone would do to our collective lifestyles and industries in just 8 years is kidding themselves. You will always find someone who predicted this in hindsight, but by and large, if you go back and look at the public media at the time, this device was largely dismissed because it didn't make sense. It was a really bad phone. It literally was, right? You couldn't even make phone calls on some of these things. So from a Nokia point of view, this was just a bad phone, right? They didn't have it right. But also from a BlackBerry point of view, how were you supposed to do messaging on this thing? It didn't even have a keyboard. So a keyboard on a screen was much inferior to a physical keyboard. And it still is, But that was not the point. What this thing unleashed is a fundamental change in the way we produce software, the way we communicate. The iPhone, then the iPad changed many things. It changed music, it changed meetings, it changed the way we communicate and relate to each other. So that change is much more profound than just the technology change. This is the Pope inauguration in 2005. and this is 2013. Yeah, so that is one of those pictures which just brings it home, the kind of change that we're seeing. This is not a technology change. This is not just a technology change. It's not just a behavioral change. It is a fundamental change in our understanding of what is important about an industry. The iPhone was not a better smartphone. It was not a better phone. It was a miniaturized computer. It achieved something technologically that never had been done before, but it also changed the way in which we related to devices. Yeah, so the changes are holistic. They're not to be pinpointed on one of those technological changes. The problem is we're doing it over and over again, right? The smartwatch comes out, the Apple Watch comes out, and people ask, what problem does it solve? What can it do for me? I don't need this. Of course you don't. You didn't need an iPhone back then, right? But that's not the point. The point is that these things allow us to do things that haven't been done before. They're not about doing something better or solving a problem or addressing a customer pain point. They're about inventing new futures. They're about letting us do things that we haven't done before. So what will the Apple Watch become? We don't know, but I'm happy to be part of it and to see what people make of it. And I'm sure it will allow us to do things that we haven't even imagined in areas that we haven't even thought about. But that's the whole point about disruption. It's not incremental change, it's path-breaking change, right? And when you're in an industry and a disruptor comes along, they don't try to beat you at your game. They try to change the rules. And when they do, their product will look superior on the new rules, and yours will look outdated. But they haven't changed your product. Your product has probably become better incrementally, but the path has changed on which you have to track into the future. So what I want to do is I want to just tell you in a few words why I think it is so hard to react. First of all, it's very hard to spot the disruption as it unfolds. First of all, there's not just one technology. Right? In hindsight, it always looks inevitable. Sure, the iPhone, the iPad, Uber. Right? At any moment in time, there's any number of technologies and startups competing for attention and to be the next disruptor. It's very hard to predict where it goes. As incumbents also, we're very much locked into seeing the future as an extension of the past. We try to model industries. The more we do big data and lock ourselves into models that are based on a current understanding of the industry, the more problems we might actually have to shift away from that understanding. So unlike what Kim Williams said earlier, I believe intuition is ever more important. You cannot predict the future just by extrapolating on more data, because that path-breaking change won't show up in data that you collect today. Second, information rules. It's digital disruption. Disruptors are vastly better at executing with information and with digital technologies. Uber, Airbnb, none of them own any of the assets that deliver the actual service, but they disrupt because they're much better at orchestrating the information flow and therefore reallocating buyers and suppliers and appropriating rent from this game. Risk is a problem. If you are an incumbent business, you've probably worked quite well and built a sustainable business in a reasonably stable market by achieving more economies of scale, by reducing risk, by becoming really good at what you do. Now, when the disruption happens, that becomes your greatest liability, because decisions are made on a business case. You want to know what is the outcome. Guess what? You can't. When you have to compete in a disrupted market, you cannot possibly know what the outcome of a business decision might be. So you have to operate on a different model, a model that startups are already operating on. And one point, utility of the product. Take the music industry. When MP3 came along, it was vastly inferior in terms of sound quality. Guess what? It still is. But it's no longer important. What has changed is not that MP3 has gotten better and overtaken CD in quality. What has changed is that music is different today. Music has a different significance in our collective lives. What is important about music is no longer superior sound quality, at least not for the majority of consumers, but that it is accessible, that it is mobile, that you can stream music. So what is important here is that we're no longer on a linear progression model. And finally, speed. By the time the disruption becomes apparent and the market has shifted and customers want a different product, the disruptor is already up to speed, whereas the incumbent, for the reasons that I mentioned, might be too slow to react. So that's a bit of a gloomy outlook, but I think there are certain things that can be done, and we can discuss this on the panel, I'm sure. I call this the virus model, for those of you who have paid attention to the acronyms. Always important to have a good acronym. But virus actually has a deeper meaning, because much like a virus, the infection happens slowly, and by the time full-blown disease hits, it might already be too late. Thank you very much.